Today on Church and State, we'll be joined by best-selling author Jim Simpson, author of the new book, Who Was Karl Marx? The Men, the Motives, and the Menace Behind Today's Rampaging American Left. Hello, Christian Patriots, and welcome to Church and State, where we strive to plug you into the pew and plug you into politics. And I'm your host, Caleb Collier, and with me, as always, Pastor Gabe Blomgren.
It is an honor. I'm so blessed to have today's author with us because you and I were introduced to a concept called the Cloward Piven, and Rahm Emanuel coined the term, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I am telling you right now, we are seeing crisis all over the world. And as Christians, we need to understand the root of this, which is the Marxist agenda. Karl Marx and communism is from the pit of hell.
Absolutely.
I'm fully convinced of it. And then what you see today, you kind of have to who's the good guy, who's the bad guy? And we have to remember Vladimir Putin is a communist.
He is. Yeah, there's no doubt.
I don't know what Zelensky is, but I have to just
corrupt.
we have to acknowledge this. Even when we look at Vietnam, man, it's like, were we in the wrong? We were invading their backyard, but you have to remember, communism is from the pit of hell.
Indeed. Yeah. Now, something that is not from the pit of hell, I'll tell you, Gabe. I just got my box from My Pillow.
You telling me about these slippers?
The first thing my wife and I did was we put on those slippers. Those things are like walking on clouds. I'll tell you, they are absolutely phenomenal. And I rested my head last night on my pillow, and I slept like a baby. It was fantastic.
So this is for all you dog owners out there. I have 3 chocolate labs. We love our labs, but now we have taken them to a whole another level of spoiled. We bought 2 My Pillow dog beds, and dude, these things.
Have 3 dogs, and you only bought 2.
Well, we already have one dog with he's got this massive.
I was going to say you're creating a fight there.
Oh yeah.
Going for
there's a little bit inside jealousy, but
go ahead.
We got this box, and I thought it was just a small box. Dude, this thing expanded and expanded and expanded. They can fit so much in there.
Yeah, they can. They really can. They vacuum seal it. But remember, to our audience, My Pillow promo code Church and State, and you can save up to 66% off. Ladies and gentlemen, this is such a fantastic opportunity for you to support 2 Patriot businesses, not only My Pillow, but also what we're doing here on Church and State. So with that, let's go ahead. Gabe, why don't you go ahead and take that intro? Because don't do it all, because we could spend the whole show just talking about how bona fide this guy is.
Yeah, you take a look at his credentials while I'm just saying his bio. James Simpson is an investigative journalist, businessman, and former economist and budget examiner for the White House Office Management and Budget. Under Presidents Reagan, H.W. Bush, and Clinton, since 1995, he has written nonfiction articles for various periodicals, both on his experiences in government and business and long-standing advocacy of public policy.
So with that, Jim, thank you so much for joining us in Church and State. We really appreciate your time.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. Great to be with you.
Excellent. Yes. So you have written a new book, and I love what you're discussing here, because a lot of people view communism in kind of the 1980s idea, that hey, we beat communism. We destroyed it. We tore down the wall. We're okay. Communism isn't something that we're necessarily facing anymore. But the reality is, it's rearing its ugly head all across America, and the examples are BLM and Antifa.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. And, I overheard you talking about never letting a good crisis go to waste. And, of course, the crisis strategy, as you pointed out, was invented by, or at least articulated, not really invented, but articulated by Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven, who are 2 Columbia University professors and who are also hardcore communists. But in the book, I have a whole chapter on them, but I quote Lisa Fithian, who is probably the most prominent anarchist in the country, and she was behind the Ferguson riots. She's been behind so many of these things. She organizes all this stuff and flies in and out first class and stays in top hotels while she's doing it. But she said, create crisis, because crisis is that edge where change is possible. And she said that before anybody had ever heard of Antifa. But Antifa is really just the same professional rioters, really, and protesters who were part of the 1999 Seattle World Trade Center organization riots, where they essentially burnt down parts of Seattle, Washington. And so, this is a very popular theme with them. And what we're seeing today, and everything is going on, is the crisis strategy on steroids. Everything, the border, the out of control inflation, the oppressive actions of this intolerable administration, and everything else we see going around. It's all part and parcel of that strategy to overwhelm our society with problems until we either go riot in the streets ourselves or just throw up our arms and give up.
And either one is really the direction that they're trying to push us to. Yeah. Jim, we're based in Washington State, and so Gabe and I have had a front row seat for a number of years into exactly what the left is attempting to do, whether it be in Portland or Seattle. We've seen exactly what they're attempting to do. Now, they tried it over where we're at in Spokane, and we actually had 1,000 armed patriots line up in the streets, and Antifa tucked tail and ran. They were terrified. They knew that this was not an area that they could actually be successul.
Yeah, we also see...
it's part of the real America, a part of Washington State, yeah.
Absolutely.
This term woke and the wokeism is infecting the church as well. He's out of the limelight now. Karl Lentz, we see Hillsong Church. I'm a pastor, Jim, and my forte and expertise is the religious community, the spiritual evangelical community. And we see the infiltration of BLM into the church because this wokey spirit, Karl Lentz, I don't know if you remember this, but back before he was exposed as an adulterer, running Hillsong New York, he was putting Instagram videos of his daughter at BLM rallies, chanting, yelling, face painted, and he would say on his Instagram videos, "Oh, I'm so proud of my daughter, what she's doing for justice," and saying that was Christ-like.
Yeah, it was such a disappointment because I really liked Hillsong music; it was great. But then they came out with all this stuff, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's just too much. And unfortunately, a lot of churches are going that way, and they're really not Christian churches. Honestly, I mean, they don't understand what it means to be a Christian if they think they are, because none of that stuff is biblically sound at all. And if they were Christians, they'd be well on the other side of that argument.
Yeah, and it's really given us an opportunity here in that there is a separation, and Gabe, you can speak to this as a pastor, but that wheat from the chaff is what we're really seeing within the Christian churches right now. Because, the pandemic, of course, but also, this push into leftist ideologies, into Marxism from the church. If you're seeing that in your church, it's time to go. You cannot be a part of that church anymore. Find a good Bible-believing church that actually believes in American principles.
Yeah, well, I actually wrote a book about 10 years ago called The Patriot's Handbook. And in it, I talk about that. If your church is supporting, like a lot of churches, huge number of churches are under the U.S. Council, the National Council of Churches umbrella. And the National Council of Churches is a communist organization, subsidiary of the World Council of Churches, which is controlled by the KGB, or what used to be called the KGB. And so while churches were, people were committing their tithes to these churches, those churches were turning around and sending them to the National Council, which would go to the World Council, and then it would go to communist terrorists operating in South Africa and other parts of Africa. So, I said at that time, look at what your donation list is for your church, what missions they support, where they send their money. And if it goes to any of these organizations, you have to tell your pastor he either has to go 180 degrees in the other direction, or you're going to leave and you're going to take anybody you can talk into to leave as well. Because they're not Christian churches. They're not carrying forward the Great Commission. They are destroying church. They are undermining the church. And I've written about that as well. I wrote a very long article for Center for Security Policy called Michigan Faith Communities in the Crosshair, where I focus on Michigan in particular, but it can be extended to the whole country and, in fact, to the whole West.
This is something that, Bella Dodd warned us about this all the way back in the 80s, that they were infiltrating the churches intentionally because they wanted to take Christians and move them over to the left side of the ideology or the spectrum there.
Yep. No, absolutely. And I forget the name of her book, but I think it was actually written in the 50s. She had been a communist herself in the Catholic Church, and her job was to infiltrate, and she claimed 1,200 communists had been infiltrated into the Catholic Church in the 20s and 30s. And many of those were homosexual priests as well. And that was not just by accident. All of that stuff was designed to utterly corrupt, morally corrupt, and destroy the Catholic Church, not because so much about God, but because they knew that the Catholic Church was one of the strongest bulwarks against communism, both in Central America, South America, and places like Poland and elsewhere. They needed to destroy it if they were going to conquer those regions. And that's also why the KGB created liberation theology and then recruited a priest, the Peruvian priest, I can't think of his name offhand, to begin to mainline that into South and Central American Catholicism, so that the people, the Catholics, would work for the communist insurgencies, all financed by Castro through the Soviet Union, to take over. And that's essentially what they've done.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you brought up the administration a little bit ago, and I did want to talk, because I know that you're an expert in this subject, the ties between the Biden administration and the communist Chinese.
Is there any difference?
Yeah. Right.
I mean, they're attached at the wrists and ankles, really, and the Chinese communists hold the keys. The Biden administration is absolutely, utterly compromised, and I don't think they care today. I don't think they ever cared. They like being wealthy. They don't like earning their money. And so they have chosen to take advantage. Joe Biden has chosen to take advantage of his circumstances, his position of power, to engorge his entire family with vast wealth that he couldn't earn, a pittance of on his own. He was a lousy lawyer. He cheated in law school. He's plagiarized. He's a serial liar. He lies every time he opens his mouth. It's really stunning. And he's amazingly good at it for somebody who's actually becoming senile. But they are totally compromised, completely and totally compromised. And my friend Peter Schweizer has written that incredible book, Red Handed, that documents every bit of it. The media has come up with, $3.5 million paid to the Bidens by the wife of the mayor of Moscow, money from Ukraine, some money from China, but Peter Schweizer puts the number on it, $31 million.
Wow.
And what they don't talk about also is that his brother Frank also got wealthy in Central America. Joe Biden, under President Obama, was given the task of overseeing Central American operations. And what they did there was attempted to install a communist government in Guatemala. I've written about that, and I'm actually writing a book about it. It's stunning what they did. They actually instigated the refugee crisis from the Northern Triangle by celebrating and encouraging the remaining communist insurgents who were in a small area in northeastern Guatemala, and they were allowed to spread throughout the country, creating economic chaos and terrorism, and made the statement that these people were fleeing, terrible conditions and crime and terrible economic circumstances. They made it true.
Manufactured crisis.
And then at the very same time, Obama declared the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, the DACA program, which was basically saying the doors are open, we're here, come on. And then he created the Parents of Children, the DAPA program, for the parents as well. And that is what instigated the beginning of the mass migration.
Go ahead.
No.
You see these manufactured crises, which creates these huge refugee numbers. And it says here on your bio, you have an expertise, and you've written a book about that refugee, connection on the red-green axis. So your forte is the refugee immigration, agenda to basically infiltrate America, erase America. What are you seeing right now with all the refugees that are coming into Poland, that are coming into Romania, that are coming into some in Moldova? What are you seeing in your opinion? Is this similar? A lot of times when they send in the refugees, they have an agenda. I just want to hear from you, me being somebody who just returned back from seeing this firsthand. I need to hear from an expert. What is going on here?
Sure. Well, it is clearly a refugee crisis, and no doubt about that. And those people are fleeing for their lives. There's no doubt about that. They definitely fall under the definition of a refugee. But it's similar to the Syrian refugee crisis, which really didn't heat up until 2015, when the Soviets and their Syrian cutouts, if you will, began bombing civilian areas. When the Soviets said they were going to go after ISIS, they didn't go after ISIS. They started bombing civilian areas. And that's when this huge refugee flow was triggered. But at the same time, they created this massive refugee camp right outside of Syria and Lebanon and places, Jordan. But it triggered a mass migration, and somebody got the word out as far as Afghanistan, countries in Africa, and they were all told, come on now, the door's open. And Angela Merkel, who was never a West German, she was an East German communist. Her father was a hardcore communist. She is a hardcore communist. She became chancellor and was working at the behest of Putin the entire time. So she threw open the doors to Western Europe, and because of the agreements that they had with the EU, all of those borders were open. So it was basically fait accompli. There were going to be mass migration, and there was mass migration. It was about 70%, young males. And so you could have anticipated all of the terrorism and all the chaos that happened has now become pretty much a part of daily life throughout Western Europe. Now, I don't know if that same motive was at work here, or if it was just people just literally fleeing for their lives because the Russians were bombing the entire place out. But I would say, if I had to guess about it, I would say that, the communists they always have dual purposes. They always have a multi-pronged strategy. So his strategy is to take over Ukraine. His ultimate strategy is to bring all of the former Soviet states back into a reconstituted USSR That's his ultimate game. He's maybe had more trouble in it than in Ukraine than he figured. He's definitely going to have a lot of trouble trying to do that to Poland and some of the other Eastern European countries who have discovered, oh, what the heck, freedom is actually pretty nice, But there's still communists in all of those countries, and basically waiting for the go signal to come out of the woodwork. Now, I've been told from a friend who has people there, some of them actual former Ukrainian communists, who say, you know what, we like this better. We're going to fight against Russia to try to keep our independence. I don't know if that's true or not, because if Russia takes over, which it eventually will, and they don't get out of there, those people are going to be rounded up, lined up against a wall, and shot. Yeah. But so I would say that that Putin is bombing the place into the Stone Age, so to make it to win, to demonstrate how ruthless he can be, and to instigate this refugee crisis, which will cripple the economies of those countries immediately surrounding Ukraine, with the ultimate goal of undermining them and eventually taking them over too.
It's a brilliant strategy. I mean, you have to hand it to him on that one. Now, I did want to, Gabe brought up the red-green axis, and you were discussing Syria there. And being that I work for Understanding the Threat, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this red-green axis with you, because you are one of the bigger experts in this arena here. So you've written 2 books on the red-green axis, I believe. A lot of people don't necessarily know exactly what that is. Can you describe that for us a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. The red-green axis is the collusion between the communists and the Islamists. And what most people don't know about, and I hate to use the term radical Islam because you can say Islam, but the people that are prosecuting, the terrorists, the Hamas, the Palestine Liberation Organization, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. These are all KGB creations. Nobody understands that. The Muslim Brotherhood was not a KGB creation. Hassan al-Banna founded the Muslim Brotherhood in 1928. But if you go back through the history, you'll find out that it was even then a marriage of Islamic ideas and socialism. Isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. But after World War II, they had been supported by Hitler during World War II. But after World War II, the Soviet KGB took over. And so the Muslim Brotherhood has survived and flowered on the strength of the arms, the training, the intelligence, and the resources they got from the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union never gives stuff away. It was always to be used as a false flag operation to continue to prosecute Soviet aggression against the West, but keep our eyes focused on something else, a separate entity entirely. And, a lot of people believe that they're Islamic supremacists. Well, that probably is true with some of them, but if they ever, none of them have any doubt of who's at the top of that food chain. The Iranians talk about, spreading Shia all over the world and looking for the 12th Imam, but the Iranians are working at the guidance and direction of the Russians, and they know perfectly well that if they wander off the reservation, whoever decides to do that is going to be found dead in a ditch somewhere very quickly, because they know all the people, they know all the bodies are buried, they know everything. And, like, for example, during the civil war in Lebanon, the reason that festered so long was because Hafez Assad, the Syrian leader, who was client state of Brezhnev's Russia, and the Ba'ath Party, the Syrian Ba'ath Party, is just simply the Arab Communist Party. Nothing different about that. And when the Israelis chased the PLO into Lebanon and began trying to get them out of there, Assad began arming all of the various militia groups, the Amal militia and the PLO, and there were dozens of other small militias, and he gave them just enough so they'd all have to fight. He didn't give any of them enough to win, but he gave them all just enough to create chaos and force them all to essentially fight each other. They didn't have a choice, right? And so they all fought, and they had this chaos, and the place was a mess. And then Assad marches in his troops as the conquering hero, and everybody says, "Oh, hooray, we've been saved." It was a strategy all along. And now Lebanon is essentially Syria,
which Lebanon used to be the envy of the Middle East. It was the Paris of the Middle East. It was beautiful.
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was wonderful. It was Western. It was a democracy. It was a wonderful place, and they utterly destroyed it and then took it over. And now anybody that gets too uppity, I mean, you've seen what has happened to some of the Christian leaders in Lebanon. They wind up getting blown up or getting a bullet in the back of their head.
I've got a siren going here.
That's the strategy. And in fact, the strategy with the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union fell, quote unquote, in 1991, suddenly all of these Islamic terrorist groups just came out of the woodwork. Now, they were always there, and they were always, sort of in the background. They were hijacking airliners and engaged in some terrorism that, gained them a lot of notoriety. But after the Soviet Union fell, they really turbocharged their operations. And that was because the Soviet Union wanted to have a constant armed offensive against the West that they could plausibly deny as their own. Because when the Soviet Union fell, it didn't really fall. It was a false flag operation. Sun Tzu calls it deny your enemy an enemy. And so it was orchestrated from the top. The fall of the Berlin Wall was orchestrated from the top. And that also was a soft invasion of West Germany, which overwhelmed it with problems because basically everybody in East Germany was, they were on welfare, they were starving, they had lived under communism for decades, and then of course it got many East Germans into the West German government, and all the East Germans were communists. So it essentially was a soft invasion of West Germany, and so now, and meantime, in the West, we all declared ourselves the victors and went home. The Republicans said, see, it was Reagan and his defense policies, they congratulated themselves. The Democrats said, see, we never thought they were that bad all along. So they both declared themselves the victors, went home, and immediately began spending the so-called peace dividend before there was any peace on domestic programs, with Teddy Kennedy leading the charge, proposing hundreds of billions in welfare programs before the paper was even signed, so to speak. So,
absolutely.
And then of course all throughout Central, South America, and Africa, the communists immediately had a free hand because we weren't there anymore. We thought we'd won.
Yeah. Now, Jim, we've run out of time. It goes far too quickly, and we're going to definitely have to have you back on. Now, your book, Who Was Karl Marx? The Men, the Motives, and the Menace Behind Today's Rampaging American Left. Now, you can get this on Amazon. We've got that up for our audience. They can see it. Is there a website as well that they can go to, sir?
Yeah, they can go to my website, crisisnow.net, crisisnow.net. And I don't have an order page there, but I have a link that will send you directly to the Amazon site, which you otherwise have to search around for. So that makes it more convenient. Plus, it has all the archives of my many articles that I've written over the years.
Excellent. Well, we highly encourage our audience to go check out that page. Sir, it was an absolute pleasure.
Been an awesome pleasure. And you are a trove. You're a history buff.
Yes, of the menace that we currently face. So thank you so much for your time, sir. We do appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Church and State is sponsored in part by On Fire Ministries and Understanding the Threat, Vanquishing Liberty's Enemies and Restoring the Republic. And with that, Church and State is out.
God bless.